I'm pleased to speak about our guest speaker today. I've known this gentleman for a number of years. He's been involved with a lot of community activities and different organizations. He's interviewed a lot of veterans over the years. He was with Czech Television for over 45 years as an anchor and a producer. Please welcome Graham Hart.
Thank you, David, very much for that kind introduction. Mr. Chairman, veterans of D-Day, all veterans, ladies and gentlemen, students from Rima Christian School, and all other young members of our community here today. Thank you for taking the time to recognize, remember, and show your appreciation for those who served our country to ensure our freedom, and especially in the campaign we are recognizing today. And what a great honor it is for me to have been given the opportunity to speak briefly at this ceremony today. Its official title was Operation Overlord. The term D-Day had traditionally been the generic title given to the first day of any military operation. But it makes sense that this event, which marked the beginning of the end of World War II, would see that generic title morph into the name by which it would forever be known. After all, this D-Day began the largest military operation ever staged and the largest amphibious invasion in military history. It was January of 1944 when American General Dwight D. Eisenhower was appointed Supreme Allied Commander of Operation Overlord. And in the following 5 months, complicated and demanding preparations would be made to ensure its success. Not only of the invasion itself, but the follow-through that would have the Allies press on through France in the final push to take Germany itself. For example, to ensure there'd be sufficient fuel to meet the needs of the Allied motorized vehicles once in France, a fuel line was actually strung from England to France across the English Channel, capable of carrying 1 million imperial gallons a day to power the tanks and armored vehicles into the interior of France and beyond. Described as a masterpiece of wartime cooperation between the military, private industry, and engineering, it required more than 100 merchant Navy officers, a variety of ships, and 1,000 men in a clandestine operation to hide it from enemy detection. Part of the preparations also included a ruse to convince the Nazis into anticipating an Allied invasion at Pas-de-Calais, the closest French coastline to England. Fake radio transmissions, double agents, and even a phantom army commanded by famed American General George Patton were all created in an attempt to force Germany to concentrate its main defenses at Pas-de-Calais. But Adolf Hitler, already anticipating an Allied invasion from across the English Channel, had months before directed Field Marshal Rommel to fortify Nazi defenses all along the northern coast of France in what would be known as the Atlantic Wall, that by 1943 had seen the completion of a nearly 4,000-kilometer-long line of bunkers, the creation of beach and water obstacles, and an estimated 4 million landmines along the beaches of Normandy. And so German defenses were at the ready when exactly 75 years ago this day, the combined Allied forces of Canada, Britain, the United States, numbering in excess of 160,000, had their work cut out for them with the support of nearly 7,000 ships and landing vessels and 2,400 aircraft. The original plan, delayed by a day by inclement weather, it would all begin in the pre-dawn of June 6, 1944, when some of those 2,400 aircraft towed 867 gliders for the sole purpose of dropping paratroopers behind the enemy lines to destroy bridges and roads in an effort to slow Nazi reinforcements from reaching their targets once the assault was underway. Despite the fact the D-Day invasion was designed as a surprise attack, an estimated 50,000 German troops, thanks to Rommel's Atlantic Wall, were already spread across the beaches of Normandy in anticipation of a possible attack by the Allies somewhere along that coastline. So when most of those 160,000 plus troops stormed the 5 Normandy beaches of Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword, arriving on a plethora of landing craft, they were met with fierce resistance. The Allied soldiers seemingly easy targets for the German snipers and their machine guns waiting on the bluffs behind those open beaches, over which those troops were forced to move toward the enemy with little protection, other than that offered by the firepower of the ships that had brought them there. On Juno Beach, the first lines of Canadian troops were gunned down en masse by the Nazi artillery and gunners. But with courage, determination, and self-sacrifice, in the face of fierce, close-quarter fighting, they pressed on. The young Canadian soldiers found the courage to keep going even after losing close friends and comrades in that battle. Of those members of the 3rd Canadian Division, renowned British historian John Keenan wrote, "At the end of the day, its forward element stood deeper into France than those of any other beach save Omaha." That, wrote Keenan, was an accomplishment in which the whole nation of Canada could take considerable pride. By the end of the day, Allied casualties were put at 10,000 killed, wounded, and missing in action. Of those, 946 were Canadians, 574 wounded, 340 killed. Amongst them, some from right here in Peterborough County, whose names are listed on the war memorial behind me. William Askam, William John Bolster, Charles Chun, John Stanley Cooper, Frederick Robert Drummond, James Frederick Mills Hall, Joseph Thomas Heffernan, Robert Cameron Milburn, Roy Hudson Tranter, Arthur Orville Williams, and Sidney Howard Youngs. In the end, Canadians at Juno captured more towns and territory than any other battalions in Operation Overlord, and by June 11th, all 5 Normandy beaches were secured by Allied forces. Remarkably, during that entire campaign, not one Canadian naval vessel was lost in the D-Day invasion. And lest we assume, as can easily be done, that only men were involved in the final push toward victory, a just-released book by award-winning author Sarah Rose entitled The D-Day Girls tells the story of 39 extraordinary women recruited by Britain's elite spy agency during World War II who parachuted into France to live under cover behind enemy lines and arm and train the members of the French resistance, often just teenagers, who'd become, in essence, an underground army, ready and available to assist Allied soldiers in the D-Day invasion and thereafter, and they did. These women orchestrated the blowing up of bridges and power exchanges, the organizing of prison breaks, and generally spying on and sabotaging, when possible, the Nazis. The women, all Army commanders, played a significant role in the D-Day invasion success, all an integral part of paving the way for the eventual Allied victory in Europe. And of course, they were joined by so many other women throughout the war who worked in factories making armaments, as the majority of codebreakers, listening to enemy radio traffic and intercepting secret German codes, and of course, in medical facilities, helping restore the wounded. In the month and a half that followed D-Day, the Allies would land more than 2 million men in northern France and suffer more than 226,000 casualties. Nearly 73,000 killed or missing, and 153,500 wounded. German losses included 240,000 casualties and 200,000 captured. And between 13,000 and 20,000 French civilians died, and many more were seriously wounded. And so today we honor all the men and women whose bravery brought to an end a brutal war, and in particular we gather here today to pay homage to those from the Peterborough area who played their roles in the successful execution of the D-Day invasion on this day 3/4 of a century ago, an event that would ultimately see the enemy vanquished. 11 months after D-Day, almost to the day, Germany would sign an unconditional surrender. And I must take a moment to recognize one of the last still living Peterborough area D-Day veterans, of which there are only 3 or so. Dennis Garrett is in attendance here today, a proud and deserving recipient of the recently issued French Legion of Honor. And Joe Sullivan, I believe, is down in our audience today as well, another of those men who played a huge role in the D-Day invasion. And I would be remiss if I were not to recognize another veteran whom I see here today, the last still living World War II vet in Lakefield, Arnold Graham, who joined the war at the age of just 17, and as a rear gunner served our country along with 6 of his brothers. Rear gunners could expect to be shot down or killed within 2 weeks, or up to 5 operations. Arnold Graham certainly beat the odds, surviving the war, as in fact, remarkably, did his 6 brothers. And we also have Una Golding from the Second World War, a vet, and Bill Cridlin, and we also have Korean vets here today too as well. And what an honor it is for you to be here today on this very special D-Day remembrance 75 years after the fact. Thank you.